Hi, everybody. Welcome to the live stream tonight. The trial of Alec Murdaugh for the murders of his wife, Maggie, and his son, Paul, may be over, and Alec Murdaugh may be spending the rest of his life in prison, but the drama from the trial still hasn't ended. This week, Randy Murdaugh, Alec's brother, gave an interview to the New York Times, an explosive interview. He's speaking out, and it's pretty damning for Alec Murdaugh. I want to get into that. I want to look at what Randy said before Alec was ever suspected in the murders, and compare it to what he's saying now to the New York Times, and talk about where and when he changed his mind, what convinced him that there may be some involvement of Alec, or that he, as he said to the New York Times, knows more than what he's saying. I also want to do just a quick update on what the jurors are saying. I may do a full analysis of that later, and please be sure to put that in the comments if you'd be interested in that. And I'm going to give you a little bit more about the Lori Vallow Daybell trial that we're going to be covering next. She's set for trial starting at the beginning of April, and we're going to be covering that if it does go to trial, if it's not postponed or put off. Idaho is asking for the death penalty in her case. She's accused of killing her children and of conspiring to kill the wife of her present husband, who was at that time, according to the prosecution, someone she was having an affair with. So let's get started with what brother Randy Murdaugh said to the New York Times. One of the first questions is why? Why would he give an interview to the New York Times? Obviously, he did not have to. And he didn't testify at trial. So it leaves me wondering what made him decide to give an interview in a super public way to the New York Times. And the only reason I can think of, and I'd love comments from you, but the only reason I can think of is that he really wanted to distance himself from Alec Murdaugh. Since he didn't testify at trial, he had to go out and publicly do that. And that would be my guess, but I'd be interested in your speculation about it. And I want to contrast what he said with what he said before. And I mean way before, shortly after the murders, what he said in an interview with John Marvin with ABC that was shortly after the murders. Now, after the trial, the defense lawyer said that the family was standing strong with Alec Murdaugh. This was what Jim Griffin said. He said, after 6 weeks of trial, they, meaning the family, came away more convinced that he did not do this, and they are steadfastly in his camp and support him. So this was the comment from Jim Griffin about how the family was reacting now that Alec Murdaugh had been convicted and was being sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms in prison. Clearly, though, that statement did not encompass Randy Murdaugh because of what he's saying to the New York Times. If that's the family party line, then Randy Murdaugh has clearly split from the party line. What he told the New York Times was that he, Alec, knows more than what he's saying. He's not telling the truth, in my opinion, about everything there. Now, Randy has plenty of reason not to trust Alec. We heard about a lot of that at trial. For example, we heard about the fact that Alec took a check that should have been written to Randy for expenses that he had made a contribution to the firm for. Randy had made the contribution, and Alec, somehow that check was mistakenly written to Alec. Alec got the firm to reissue it and cashed the check, and then cashed the original check a few months later. Neither of those checks belonged to Alec. One of those checks belonged to Randy. Alec said, my mistake, and everybody assumed he was right, that it really was just a mistake. So at that point, so Randy, while he may be the subject of losing the $125,000, believed his brother apparently that it was just a mistake, as did everyone in the law firm. Then another reason Randy would have to distrust Alec would be the fact that after the murders of Maggie and Paul, which were in June, all the way into September, Randy Murdaugh was confronted by his law partners with facts that showed Alec Murdaugh had stolen from clients and stolen from the firm, and convinced the firm to write checks, for example, to that fake Forge account, which was really an Alec Murdaugh account, and he was taking client funds. Randy was confronted by his law partners, and then he and another partner went to Alec and said, this is what we found you are doing, and you must resign. Alec did agree to resign and told them that he was a drug addict. That was the first, according to numerous witnesses, that anyone other than Maggie, Paul, and Buster and Alec's dad knew about Alec Murdaugh being an addict. Alec also said, according to Randy and in the New York Times, at that time that he would never lie to Randy again. But apparently that statement was broken. That promise not to lie was broken just 24 hours later, because 24 hours later was when Alec Murdaugh was shot in the head on the side of the road. According to Alec, what he told his brothers, what he told police at that time, a quote, Good Samaritan had stopped to help him, but instead of helping him with the flat tire he had, the Good Samaritan shot him in the head and left him. Now, later, after he was in rehab, Alec would call SLED and confess to them that none of that was true, not knowing SLED already knew that. SLED had already figured out that that wasn't true. But what Alec Murdaugh told them was, the news story, was that instead of him, the entire thing had really been a plot. There was an attempted suicide. What he wanted to do, an assisted suicide, I should say, well, both. What he wanted to do was make sure that he died, but that his son Buster could get his $12 million life insurance policy. And the only way he knew to do that, rather than kill himself, which might void the policy, apparently it really wouldn't, according to something Jim Griffin said, but Alec Murdaugh thought that. The only thing he could do was have someone, arrange for someone to kill him. That way he could protect Buster's ability to get this life insurance. So the whole thing had been an insurance fraud scheme. And of course, Alec Murdaugh was in charge for that. So he within 24 hours of saying, I will never lie to you again, told Randy, I was shot in the head by this supposed Good Samaritan who stopped. Then that story was overturned. And there were ripple effects for Randy. For example, Randy said to the New York Times that he had to tell clients, look, I'm not him. I'm not Alec Murdaugh. I'm doing things the right way. I've always done things the right way. And he also talked about this sort of surreal experience that he had during Alec's trial when he was handling the settlement for a family his brother had represented. So it's in the middle of Alec's trial. He's not there because he's in court. And Randy has to go through all the extra steps he took to make sure and to assure the court and the clients that Alec had not stolen any money from these particular clients. So let's take a look at what Randy was saying before there were any allegations against Alec Murdaugh. This is shortly after the murders, and this is before he had any idea that Alec would later confess to stealing from his clients and to stealing from the law firm. So let's go ahead and listen to this interview done by ABC. This was shortly after the murders. It's Randy Murdaugh and John Marvin Murdaugh talking about what's happened with the family.
Person, and she was the rock of their family, his voice.
Let me go back, because what he says at the beginning is especially important.
He's a very caring person.
He's a very caring person. He's saying Alec, his brother, is a very caring person.
And she was.
And just to clarify, I cut this into a little bit so you could just focus on what it is that Randy says during the interview.
The rock of their family, his voice, the fear.
Now he's going to talk about the night of the murders, when he first heard from Alec about the murders.
He was just distraught. But the person that did this is out there, and there's information, however big or however small it is.
Do you think anyone in your family interfered in any way?
And specifically with this question, she was asking about the boat wreck case and the allegations that the Murdaugh family had interfered with the investigation into the boat wreck where Paul Murdaugh, now having been murdered, but where Paul Murdaugh was accused criminally of boating under the influence in a boat wreck where the boat crashed into a bridge and Mallory Beach was killed.
I don't.
Do you feel like some of the perception of your family has been wrong?
Yes. I see words like dynasty used and power. And I don't know exactly how people use those words, but we're just regular people and we're hurting just like they would be hurting if this had happened to them.
So clearly, Randy Murdaugh is fully in the belief that an outside party killed Maggie and killed Paul, that someone other than Alec, that clearly is not included in what he's even thinking about the case. We'll keep going.
How's your brother doing?
He's upright and looks strong and making his way, and then he just breaks down. And just, I mean, it's tough for us.
It changes you as a family. And I can't imagine the horror that my brother's experiencing. He's a very caring person.
One of the things that I think about as I watch that video and the way Randy Murdaugh talked at the time is that Randy was all in with his brother, all in with the idea that someone else did this. Alec had nothing to do with it, and he was very much concerned with how his brother was reacting and would react. That's critically important because of the fact that then if he has any questions now, that's the rug being pulled out from under Randy. That's Randy suddenly out there with being embarrassed that he went out in public and spoke about what he thought at the time. And that may account for why he was eager to set the record straight and to talk to the New York Times when he did not have to, when he easily could have never said anything to anybody about what he felt. So what he told the New York Times is that he has no doubt that his brother is a serial liar and a thief, but he's not sure whether he committed the murders. That is pretty different from being completely on board with the idea that Alec Murdaugh had nothing to do with the murders. He said that as a lawyer, he respects the verdict. Obviously, he has to say that, but he finds it impossible to picture Alec, and he says he's known him for decades as a protective husband, as a good father. It's hard for him to picture Alec pulling the trigger and killing his own wife and his own son. But he does seem to be wavering on that issue. Here's what he told the New York Times. He said, first of all, that Alec, he said he knows more than what he's saying. In other words, even if Alec Murdaugh didn't pull the trigger, he seems to be thinking that Alec knows something about who did. Randy Murdaugh also said he's not telling the truth, in my opinion, about everything there. He supported in this article in a prosecution theme that while everyone else was out there looking for Maggie's killer, looking for Paul's killer, and Randy said he himself for weeks on end called everyone he could think of to get leads, to figure out why would they have been targeted, who would do that. But Alec wasn't looking. Alec wasn't doing anything to find the killer of Maggie and Paul. Now, the prosecution said that's because he knew exactly who the killer was. He knew he did it. That was the prosecution's argument. And Maggie's sister testified to the same thing, that Alec wasn't looking for the killer when everyone else was. She also said that Alec told her that whoever killed Maggie and Paul had thought about it for a long time, which she took as a very strange comment under the circumstances. Randy said that for his family, and this is how it was quoted, written in the article, for his entire family, he said, that has been among the most painful issues to confront. The not knowing, Randy says, is the worst thing there is. Now, the way that's written, the implication sort of is None of us in the family know, and that's been very difficult for us. The implication was that no one in the family knows whether or not Alec killed Maggie and Paul, and that's hard for us. But it may not have meant that. The way he said it and the ordering may have been a little different. He may simply have been saying, not knowing who the killers are is what's been so difficult for our family. Obviously, a really different sort of a meaning. Even so, that's extremely damning because it means that Alec Murdaugh's own brother is thinking hard about whether or not Alec did it and about whether or not Alec at least knows something more about what happened. He was asked, why did no one call him? Why did no one call him to testify? And he said, well, it may just be that I didn't align perfectly with either side. How long has he suspected Alec? We got one clue by the fact that he said he has not spoken to Alec in a year. The suggestion behind that is that this trust did not stem from the trial, from Alec's testimony at the trial, or from anything Randy heard at the trial. It came before that the break between the two of them came a year ago. And yet, Randy Murdaugh showed up at many of the days of trial. He didn't come every day. He didn't come as often as John Marvin or as often as Buster and his girlfriend Brooklyn did, but he showed up for many of the days of the trial. Oh, also the sister, Lynn, came every day. And in fact, I went back through the tapes because I was curious about this. Did Randy come to the closing argument? And I could not see him anywhere in the gallery at that time. So I don't think he came to closing, which may say something too. One theory might be that the prosecution played the kennel video for him and that he concluded Alec had been at the kennels and that Alec had lied to him once again about that. But that's just a theory. We don't know what caused that ultimate break between them or why they haven't spoken in the past year. So let me look through real quickly. Are there any questions? Going through real quick. Oh, and don't forget, put your question marks at the beginning if you would. Also, would you please like this video? That really helps the YouTube algorithm and gets it out to more people. So I would appreciate that if you would. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. We have a great time here talking about the biggest, most interesting, most important cases of our day. So please be sure to do that. Okay, and I see someone, thank you, Brian, for asking people to like, which regulars here know I always forget to do. So, okay, I'm not seeing any questions. My apologies if I missed your question through there. So I'm going to keep going. Dick Karputlian has, according to him, been receiving messages from people calling him a piece of scum or hoping he dies of rectal cancer. And he's saying that people just don't get the American justice system. His quote was, "You don't have to convince me you're innocent for me to represent you. That's not the issue. The issue is, can the state prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt?" And that is in fact the point. That is how the justice system works. So I'm behind him, and I'm appalled that people would say that sort of thing to him for representing someone, because you're entitled to that under our law. The jurors have been speaking out now. The jurors have been talking about why they reached the decision they did, and they're all pointing straight to the kennel video. They clearly did not believe Alec Murdaugh when he testified and said that while he had lied about that, he was telling the truth about not having murdered them. Personally, it does sound like his testifying did not really have a lot to do with it. That's my read of what they're saying, that they already knew he was lying because so many people had pinpointed him as being there at the kennels, as that being his voice in the background of Paul's kennel video. And so they already were prepared not to believe him. He was unable to overcome that with his testimony, unable to persuade them that he was telling the truth, but they were already on the road toward convicting him, is what it sounded like to me. So I want to give you a quick, let me go down to the bottom real quick in case anybody had asked a question. I don't want to miss it. What do y'all think? So this is an interesting question here up from RLU about what do you think the lawyer's reaction would have been when they realized he had lied about the video? you know, that is such a pivotal question because the lawyers could not present his testimony if they thought that he was going to lie on the stand. If they knew that what he was going to say was false testimony, they couldn't allow him to testify while they represented him. There's a whole protocol they have to go through. Oh, I'm sorry. I put somebody's comment up here. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Hit that by accident. But so the question is, what exactly would that mean? And it would probably mean, I think the fact that he got on the stand and said, I had lied before, that was already something they suspected, right? Because of so many people testifying, his voice was in the background. And because from the beginning of the trial, they never disputed that that was Alec Murdaugh's voice. So I don't think there were any questions in their minds about whether he was lying. This was just him getting up and saying what everybody already believed, which is his voice was in the background on that. Now, beyond that, his testifying that he did not do it, they apparently felt like at a minimum, he wasn't lying about that or might possibly be telling the truth. That's what I would say would be the answer on that one. And so the question from Lisa, what do you think about a majority of the friends and family testifying for the state? Certainly, anytime somebody's friends and family come forward against them, that's a real problem. I'm trying to think, were there any family members testifying for the state? Not able to think of a family member who testified. Oh, Maggie's family. That's probably what you mean. Maggie's sister and Buster, of course, for the defense, but Maggie's sister testified for the state. I think the evidence kind of falls where it does. Which side calls a party may depend more on what exact facts they know and how that plays in. So it definitely is obviously a problem if people you think would be close to you, people you think would be connected to you, will testify for the other side. That's obviously always a problem. That means it's less likely that you're doing well, that you're winning. Is it a risk to have the jury talking to the media? Always a little bit of a risk because it can create issues for appeal. In this case, I haven't heard anything that would lead to that in any way, but that is something that can happen. Now, once the jury is discharged, they're free to do that, and the judge told them that. You don't have to talk to anybody, but you're welcome to do that if you feel like it. Let's see what the next question is. Can Randy and the law firm still sue Alec for the stolen funds? Yes, they can. There are many suits against him already. The problem is many suits and little money. So suing him is not much use if he has no money to pay for that. And that is the problem here. That's one of the reasons that some of the cases have been settled, is because of the fact that everybody knows Alec Murdaugh has no money and no prospects of making any money, no future job. So I see Kelly Casper also asked a question about the jurors. Okay, I'm going to switch over, talk real quickly about the Lori Vallow Daybell case, because it's the next case we're going to be covering. And trust me, if you were interested in the Murdaugh case, you will be fascinated by the Lori Vallow Daybell case. She and her husband, Chad Daybell, are accused of murdering her 16-year-old daughter and 7-year-old son and conspiring to murder Chad's wife at the time. Now, according to prosecutors, well, this part's known, Lori and Chad were married to other people. According to prosecutors, they began an affair shortly after October 2018. And toward the end of 2018 or the beginning of 2019, Lori began to tell people that her husband, whose name was Charles Vallow, had passed away and his body had been taken over by a zombie. Now, despite his zombie status, her husband, Charles Vallow, was permitted by Maricopa County to file for divorce from her in February of 2019. Now, Lori's brother would later kill Charles Vallow, claiming self-defense. So Charles Vallow died. Charles Vallow asked for a protective order in the course of these divorce proceedings, saying that Lori had told him she was a god and was assigned to carry out the work of the 144,000 at Christ's second coming in July of 2020. And he wrote down that she said I was in the way and she would have to murder me if I tried to stop her. He also said then on January 30th, 2019, that Lori had called him and told him she didn't trust him and would have to kill him when he got home. So then in July of 2019, Lori and Chad got into an altercation, and Lori's brother Alec shot and killed Charles Vallow, her present husband, claiming it was self-defense. Now, Lori's two kids disappeared sometime in what's believed to be about September of 2019, after Charles Vallow was killed by brother Alex. I'll have to switch over from Alec to Alex. This will be a switch time. So, and then coincidentally, on October 19th, 2019, Chad's wife, Tammy, suddenly died. With both Tammy and Chad suddenly single, they married 2 weeks later. This is a crazy case. Chad and Lori told people that they had been married to each other in a previous life and believed they had unique spiritual abilities. According to investigators, Chad Daybell, also on trial for the murders of the children and of his wife, designated light and dark scores for people. There were vibration levels, trust scales, and the prosecution said they viewed people based on what their score had been. Were they dark? Were they light? And they were spiritual threats to them. And that's how they, according to the prosecution, selected the people who would then be murdered. In the case against her for the death of her children and conspiracy in the death of Tammy Daybell, Lori has filed a motion to dismiss the death penalty. Her arguments are that, first of all, and I'll put it up here for you. Her arguments are that the media saturated coverage of the case, the nonstop articles, the documentaries, that has exposed the jurors to all kinds of bias and been a real problem. She also said that discovery violations by the government, and all that means is where the government was supposed to produce documents and information to them and hasn't, she's saying that has not been produced, mean that even if the jury decides that the death penalty is appropriate, it's not going to be upheld, Judge. It's going to be overturned. And she argues an argument that's actually sort of a hot button issue right now in the law, and that's that putting a mentally ill person to death is problematic, that it shouldn't be done. The Supreme Court has ruled that putting a mentally incapable person, a person with mental deficits, meaning intelligence level, that is inappropriate and can't be done. But the Supreme Court has not ruled that putting a mentally ill person to death is a problem. They do have to be mentally competent to stand trial. That's been a repeated problem for Lori, as twice her competency has been questioned and she's been sent for more testing. Twice she's been declared competent and able to withstand trial or able to stand for trial. And then the final argument that she made was that the state of Idaho doesn't have chemicals to kill people on death row. That is, in fact, an issue. There is somebody on death row, and that person, because Idaho has been unable to find the chemicals, that person has not been put to death. Idaho is talking about passing a statute that would allow the firing squad to be brought back, and that would be their method of handling the death penalty. So the final thing that, and I'll pull that out, she's also asking the court so she's asking for those reasons that the court decide the death penalty is off the table for Lori Vallow. That would be a hard decision for the judge to reach, because Lori and Chad's cases have been separated, and to try one under the death penalty and not the other is going to be a problem. But Lori has refused to waive her right to a speedy trial. Chad has waived his right and said, I'll take as much time as I need. I need to be prepared. That's creating a problem for the judge here, because treating them differently on the death penalty would really be a problem. Now, Lori's also saying that there are 5,000 brand new pages of evidence, 48 audio files, and the state produced them on the very last possible day. That's way too late. I don't have time to prepare. So all of these should be excluded, and we'll see what happens on that. Now, jury selection is set for March 27th. This is one unbelievably interesting case. You don't want to miss out on this, so please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.